Yajna or sacrifice is to make something sacred. Normally, sacrifice is understood in the context of giving up something in the present for the future. No pain, no gain, as they say. Because this sacrifice is directed toward false gods, power, glory, money, knowledge, and so on. This kind of sacrifice perhaps is better than a very hedonistic life, but still we can see that this is divisive in nature, and the goals that one sacrifices towards are impermanent. The true meaning of sacrifice, making sacred, is in fact sacrificing to the Supreme, where there is no pain and all gain. Ultimately, that is yajna, to sacrifice the very idea of an individual self, to make oneself sacred, one with divine. Now, in this context, let's look at what is sacrifice to the Supreme and thereby the process of purification. The first and foremost recommended sacrifice in this context is to perform every action itself as an offering, to let go of any expectation of results or outcome. This, as we have seen earlier, is called partial surrender and a great step toward purification or chitta shuddhi. Ramana Maharishi says in Upadesha Sara, Ishwararpitam Nechaya Kritam, to dedicate all actions to God and do without desire, is a great aid for purification. Even if one has a sense of doer, to realize that the results are not in my control and it is the supreme intelligence that decides the outcome that is perfect in its own way in the large scheme of things, and therefore to surrender the results and accept any outcome with equanimity. This is a great sacrifice, a great yajna. Now, as we can see, this is a different kind of yajna from what is traditionally understood in terms of rituals and what is called as fire sacrifices and so on. They have their own place, but to integrate yajna into one's own life, moment to moment, is the process of purification. And this process of performing every action as an offering is a great yajna for chitta shuddhi. Along with this, we also have certain other things we can look into before we come into the real meaning of yajna or sacrifice. One is, in addition to performing actions as an offering, also to take up actions only in accordance with realizing the truth. The Shraddha or the flame of inquiry and devotion kept alive every moment will automatically ensure that only right activities, in other words, activities that are in accordance with realizing the truth and not for pleasure or desire, are taken up. If we have the right discrimination, viveka, then we can see the impermanence of so many activities we normally indulge in and thereby shake them off and streamline our activities toward this process of purification. Some of that includes the Eightfold Yoga, for instance, taking up a very simple practice of asanas and pranayama might be helpful. One doesn't have to go overboard with these things, but to have the right posture, to sit erect, and to keep the body light and healthy is very helpful in the process of purification. On that note, food, of course, is very important. To have light, moderate food and eating only for hunger and not for all the various desires of the tongue is a very essential part of this. In fact, this is one thing that Ramana Maharishi very particularly emphasizes. He calls it Mitha Sattvika Ahara, moderate sattvic food, very helpful in the process of purification. And also, when it comes to any other activities, such as going out or meeting friends or the work we choose to do, they can all have a certain different quality to them when this shraddha or flame of attention is kept alive. And in the process, many of the unwanted activities also drop off on their own. One other thing in this context, which is also recommended by many teachers and one sees it in one's own experience, is to leave the home for some time for immersive retreats. In fact, Shankara specifically recommends it. He says, Grihat Vinirgamyatam, leave the house at least once in a while and immerse either in solitude or with other such serious seekers with Shraddha. That brings us to the one of the most important aspects of this process, which is called as satsang, or association with other sincere seekers. To be able to have regular association with people who are equally interested in waking up out of egoic identification and living life intelligently and interested in right action, in clarity, having association with such seekers, such devotees is of tremendous help. And a specific and the most important aspect of satsang, of course, is association with the sage himself. When we are in contact directly with the sage or his teachings, his work, or his activities, reading about them or watching them or even talking about them, this is of tremendous help. In fact, Srimad Bhagavatam says, and Ramana Maharshi also has translated this verse, that even holy rivers, which are only of water, and deities which are only of stone, are not as mighty as the sages, because they make one pure over a long period of time, whereas a sage merely by a glance can purify. Such is the power of the teacher, because the teacher is the teaching. To have the connection in the heart to the teacher as the embodiment of the teaching, and therefore to have this tremendous reverence in the heart for the perfect teacher who shines within as the spirit that guides in the right direction, and also without in the form of guru, is of tremendous help. And this is also where devotion comes in. Devotion to God or Guru, if one has that feeling of love, because this is not something that reason can understand. This is where the heart has to open up, and that is tremendously helped by this feeling of love. If it is there, to have that feeling and to remember and to reminisce the activities and the pastimes are all of tremendous help when it comes to avatars, when it comes to sages, and so on. This is a very glorious tradition, as we all know, and it has tremendous uh, impact. In fact, Krishna says, Yajnanam japosmi, of all yajnas, I am japa. Japa is, of course, not mechanical repetition, it is feeling and loving the presence of God without and within, and taking up that as the name, the holy name. The holiest of name, of course, is that which is within, which is nameless. And yet, that is what is pointed to by the holy name without. And therefore, having that loving connection with the name which is non different from the teacher and the teaching is what Krishna points to with that note on japa. And the most profound of all yajnas, which is very closely tied with what we talked about as devotion and dedication, is what is also called swadhyaya. Swadhyaya literally means studying oneself. And while some translations call it as studying of scriptures, which is fine in its own way, truly the word means swa adhyaya, studying oneself. This is to constantly be in the awareness of what's going on within oneself, to not identify with any memory fragment that rises up as me, because that is what we always see, is that we have different memories which come in with different avatars, if you will, of I, and sometimes they are also in conflict, as we saw. And we see this through various triggers. So, if to be very alert is part of swadhyaya, to be alert to all these triggers that cause identification to rise. Some of these triggers are pretension, to act out a persona that is not authentic, to be deceitful, lying to others and oneself, even immaturity, shirking responsibility, that is, for oneself and one's surroundings, and instead blaming others, impulsiveness, acting out of emotional impulses like anger, fear, pleasure seeking, and so on, groupthink, identifying with a particular group and being carried away through that identification into an us versus them mentality, narcissism, looking for praise, looking for pity, looking for recognition, and so on, comparison, comparing with others, comparing with the past, and all kinds of comparison resulting in pride, envy, resentment, and so on. These are all some of the various triggers in which egoic identification comes up. And if we are alert, we can see that there is an effortless awareness of these movements of ego already. We don't have to make any effort to see them. There is already an awareness within us that is aware when we lie, aware when we are angry, aware when we are comparing, resentful, and all the rest. To be alert to this effortless awareness within, and therefore to study oneself, and then to inquire who is effortlessly aware? Who am I? If there are so many eyes rising up, each with its own baggage, and then there is an eye that is watching all of this, who am I? To stay with this inquiry and to be alert in this effortless awareness. This is Swadhyaya and the greatest yajna. We may find ourselves sometimes slipping out of this awareness because of the habit of egoic identification. It is important then to have anything that can call us back into waking up. This can be listening to a discourse, looking at something, sitting silently in nature. It can even be a challenging situation, suddenly, when life throws a challenge, to be alert and treat it as a wake up call rather than respond to it from the habit of ego. Same with temptation. When the temptation comes, to use it as a moment of awareness and to not respond to temptation either through resisting it or through indulging in it, but to be very alert and be aware of the temptation and the one who is getting tempted. Thus, there are many aids. We can also have a space, for instance, that is sanctified even in our house, which traditionally every house has in India, for instance. These are all aids to go into that sacred space inwardly through an outward reminder. But the most important thing is to go into that inner space of sacredness, which is true sacrifice through swadhyaya, and along with it, true love in the heart for this pure wisdom that is flowering through the grace of the teaching and the teacher. And one last thing also important to point out in terms of sacrifice is to let go the tendency of indulging in vain reasoning and discussions intellectually. This is a great pastime of the uh, mind to feel good about itself and use reason and endlessly discuss and debate issues. As we can see, reason, while it has its place, is not the fundamental nature of our being. We are aware of when reason works. The awareness within is the field in which reason operates. So, to read a little, to discuss a little is okay, but to not be over caught in either reading too much or in discussions and so on, but to be more inwardly focused in self awareness and self inquiry is the most important sacrifice, along with opening one's heart in love, which happens naturally the more one is not rooted in the ego and its identification. So, this process of surrendering one's actions through their results, then taking up activities that are in accordance with this journey, including food and other activities and even profession and all the rest, having association with fellow seekers and valuing it, having reverence in the heart for the grace of the teacher and the teaching that is pointing us to our own inner truth, and abiding in self awareness or swadhyaya. This forms the essence of yajna, as Krishna defines in the Gita, and is the process of purification. And this, in turn, also naturally results in right action, even during the process. And as the process matures, the action also comes more naturally in the right way. And so, this journey is also the destination in one sense, as we said, because just going through the process of purification removes the obstacles to right action even during the process. And as the process evolves and matures, the obstacles seem to go away more and more. And by the grace of the teacher and the teaching, we are able to abide in the clarity that operates as right action. Thank you.